Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. Today I'm gonna do a chatty video again talking about audiobooks specifically. I was thinking about reading formats and how that shapes my reading experience. It was sort of a continuation of something I've been thinking about. I've recently started reading Mythos by Stephen Fry, which I recently bought, and it came in this big trade paperback that I have only a few books in this format. I don't really know the technical terms, the technical term for this type of paperback, but I really dislike this format, and I've noticed that in the past when I've had these oversized paperbacks, I've usually had a difficulty in getting through the book. Even though the book itself, the content, can be great, I find the holding of the book very uncomfortable. So often when I've had books in this particular format, I've avoided reading them, or I've been sort of giving up in the middle of the book. So that kind of got me thinking about reading formats and how much that affects my reading and how I adapt my reading to the different formats I have. And I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks recently, and so I wanted to focus in today on audiobooks and how I use them. Rinsey from Rinsey Reads on the Book Riot channel did a video talking about her experience with audiobooks recently, which I will link in the description. And she talks about, among other things, she talks about having a specific time to listen to audiobooks. And a lot of people I know listen to audiobooks while they're commuting, and this isn't a thing that is very useful for me. I find I have a difficulty in concentrating on audiobooks when I'm commuting. I prefer a physical copy or listening to podcasts while I'm commuting. I don't really get on with audiobooks unless they are books I've already read and really love the narrator of, like the Harry Potter audiobooks I've listened to while I've been on airplanes, for example. I find them comforting, but I would prefer a podcast if I have internet access. So one of my problems with audiobooks when I started listening to audiobooks and trying to find the perfect time that I can listen to them. And in the beginning I listened to audiobooks when I was cooking, or I just doing regular like chores, like cleaning, things like that. But I found that often I would have technical difficulties in, for example, hearing over the things that I was doing. Also that I had a harder time focusing on what was going on in the book. And one of the main problems I've had with audiobooks as a form, as a medium for reading, has been the concentration to something that is spoken rather than something that you read with your eyes. I, like a lot of other people, I found it easier for me to remember things by seeing them visually rather than listening. Unless I have a very good narrator. I remember things well, sound-wise, if I like the sound. I don't really contain a lot of the information unless I have a really good narrator. So I found it difficult at first to really engage with an audiobook and really retain what I was reading, listening to. But one thing that has definitely been the thing that has made me fall in love with audiobooks is to listen to audiobooks while I knit. I've come to the conclusion that the reason that I find it easier to sort of focus on the audiobook while I knit rather than other things is that while I knit, my hands are completely occupied, and usually when I knit I do a lot of big projects, so usually there's a big chunk of the project that is fairly easy to do. You don't really need to use your brain constantly while you're knitting. Obviously there are sections in the patterns that are more advanced, or you have to pay more attention, but usually those are just small pieces of the entire project. So I do a lot of sweater knitting and things like that. So knitting will keep my hands occupied and will also keep me active enough and focused enough to follow the book. Whereas with like cleaning or exercising, you're trying to sort of distract yourself with the audiobook, and I find that harder to do. So somehow the making something physical and creative with my hands has helped me in focusing on my listening to the audiobook. Another thing that I've been thinking about is the type of audiobooks I like to listen to. So recently I've been listening to for example, the Walt Disney biography by Neal Gabler. I listened to as an audiobook. I started reading it as a physical copy and I really enjoyed the writing style and everything, but it was a very long book. It was more than 600 pages long, and I had a lot of big projects knitting wise lined up, so I wanted a long audiobook to listen to while I was knitting. And I started listening to this. I found it really easy to follow. Obviously the thing about this book is that it's a biography, and that is one of the things I've recently discovered, is that I really like audiobooks that are character focused, whether they be nonfiction in the form of memoirs or biographies, or in the fictionalized sense, stories with a strong focus on characters. As I said, I listened to the Walt Disney biography in the end of 2017 and the beginning of 2018. Right now I'm listening to the audiobook of Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, and it's narrated by Maggie Gyllenhaal, and I love the audiobook. First of all, she is a fantastic narrator, but also just in general, Karenina is a very character-focused story. It follows a lot of characters as well, and somehow through the audiobook I feel like I've really gotten to know each and every character, and I think it probably would have taken me a longer time to get to know them through reading the physical copy, because a lot of the names are a little bit confusing to follow along. But with the audiobook it has just become very clear to me who each and everyone is, and their character, their personality, and it's just been a super great combination, this book with the audiobook, and especially with the narrator being so great. Through listening to first the biography, so a nonfiction, and then now a fiction, but both with this sort of the common factor that they are focused on characters. I've realized that I really like the character-focused stories in audio, because they're like narratives, like you're listening to someone's life story, and so it's somehow more natural to listen in audio, whereas stories that have a lot of detail and facts are harder for me to follow along. I often find that I can't remember all of the facts, and I find myself annoyed that I can't annotate. The fact that I definitely prefer character-based stories and fiction is the thing I think that has made me not listen to fiction in audio before, because I hadn't realized that I actually like fiction as long as it's focused in characters in audio. So that is something that I will definitely be doing going forward. Another thing that I kind of mentioned just before is that the annotation part. I've mentioned in several videos recently that I do a lot of annotating in my books, and obviously with an audiobook you can't annotate. So one thing that I've been doing recently, and that I think I probably will be continuing on to do, is that I listen to audiobooks that I actually own, which makes it possible for me to annotate and follow along where I'm at the book. The main thing that has made me not do this before is because audiobooks are expensive, and usually you want to buy an audiobook like as if it's a new book. So I think it's very common that we buy audiobooks that we don't own in physical copy. But I know a lot of people do kind of have both the audio and the physical. I haven't done this in the past, at least. Using Audible, which is really price-worthy, I think. It's a good price for the amount of books you get access to, as well as getting free access through the library. Is worth it to get an audio format of a book, especially a very long book, and have the physical copy to annotate in, especially if it's a book you think you will really want to keep and possibly to really engage with. Obviously, of course, there's the very important factor with audio that you like the narrator. I think thankfully with Audible you have a pretty high standard when it comes to narration. They have a lot of really good audiobooks, really well chosen narrators for their audiobooks, so you don't really have a lot of like probably they have older audiobooks as well, where the sound quality isn't good. That isn't something I've experienced, at least not recently. The Anna Karenina audiobook is actually an Audible exclusive, so I think there's probably a lot of audiobooks through Audible that are exclusively available through Audible that are really worth listening to. So I really like the Maggie Gyllenhaal narration. I really like narration that are done by actors or actresses, because they're really good with a lot of the audio-book experience is like a dramatized version. I don't really like the full cast dramatization versions of audio, but I do think that if you have the background of being an actor or actress, you have a way to tell a story, especially if you're a good actor or actress. That was basically all I wanted to say about audiobooks. Some of the things that have sort of come up very recently while I've been listening to a lot since these past few weeks of the winter. So I would love to hear your thoughts and feelings about audiobooks. When do you listen to them, if you do? Do you have any recommendations for good narrators or specific titles that work well in audio? I would love to hear about it. I hope you're having a really good day, and I will talk to you soon.